Welcome to the Strangers on the Way podcast. I am thrilled to have this powerhouse couple with me today, Stephen and Samara Keller. They currently live in California, but have traveled all over the world and lived many, many places. I'll have them share that in a bit. But I met Samara through an online school a couple years ago. We were put in a group together, and I was just captivated by her mama's heart and kindness. She has an incredible voice, and I got to know Steve through visiting them I think one fall, and was just amazed by his brilliant mind. And Steve and Samara are entrepreneurs, coaches, just incredible. I would say like cutting edge in many, many ways, in bringing just a lot of creativity and things that change lives into the world. So welcome to the podcast. So honored to have you guys here.
Thank you, Lauren.
Thank
We're
you.
honored to be part of it. Yeah, we just love your book and we just love your spirit. When you came to visit us, we love just having you in our home. And you are such a bubbly, wonderful, encouraging person. So we're honored to be your friend.
Thank you. Honored to know you guys. Would you share just a little bit about who you are, anything you're passionate about in this season, and we'll go from there.
Go ahead.
Awesome. Well, you should probably go first.
Married life, trying to figure things out, right? I wear a lot of hats. I've been an entrepreneur, mostly been an outside the box thinker, problem solver in the area of, how people are wired, how to connect them to their fundamentally powerful, authentic, original design, how to do it simpler and easier. And that's, I've done over the years, a lot of very outside the box, holistic coaching. I've had a lot of coaches as my clients and have developed some unique ways of kind of hacking mental emotional health for people. And as a result, performance in important areas of their life. Is that
Pretty good. Yeah, it's a little bit, it's a kind of a mouthful.
Yes.
But yeah.
My children struggle to explain what I do.
You bring
So
people.
sometimes I say quantum physics meets Christian inner healing.
I love that.
So.
That's such a good way to describe it. Yeah.
Yeah, so pretty outside the box. We've kind of been outside the box. We homeschooled the kids starting, when it was just in the early 2000s. So it was gaining in popularity, but it really wasn't what it became, over the last 25 years. It seems like it's gotten more popular. So we homeschooled and we were kind of not into fast food. And there were lots of little ways where we just kind of took our life in a different direction.
Yeah.
And I feel like we're reaping the benefits of a lot of that now.
Yeah.
And lately, so I did 3 years of school, focused on ministry, and that was amazing. And came out of that and actually ended up being more involved with our businesses. And so Steve and I have been doing some trainings all over the world, together. And that's been a new season for us, and that's been exciting and growing, stretching kind of experience for both of us. We've recently been to New Zealand, Australia, Europe, several countries in Europe, Holland, and just been.
So we use the business as kind of a laboratory to prove out certain concepts. Does that make sense? Like you have, this would work for people. But it's like, okay, well, prove it. And a business gives you great metrics in terms of, how successful it is, how it grows, especially the business. We have, we are in the network marketing field. So it's like you have to have very high level leadership because you're just dealing with an army of volunteers. You're dealing with people who've never been in business before. People who sometimes, the joke is sometimes a business like this is a personal development course with a paycheck attached. So we have an opportunity to prove out concepts both in the kind of the esoteric quantum law of attraction type realm and hardcore, very leadership basics, and see how well they come together for people who are, kind of very brand new to making big changes in their life.
Believing in people mostly.
Yeah.
That's amazing. It's been really neat to see. I feel like coaching has popped up a lot in the past couple years, and I feel like that's actually like a strategic thing by God to equip people, to step into how He's created them. What are some just like highlights from doing that work in the past couple seasons?
Goodness, I mean, we see people, I guess the big thing is we've really been focusing a lot on flow lately, the past couple of years. So I've always wanted to go, okay, uh, here's a good example. This man, he was an engineer and he was hanging out and playing with his very young son. And they're playing with Legos. And they were building a bridge. And one side of the bridge was higher than the other side of the bridge. So he's like, oh, I'm going to go and I'm going to fix it. So he went to go get more Legos to make it even. And when he comes back, his young son had already fixed it, but he had fixed it by taking pieces out instead of adding things. He's like, oh, that's actually a better way to do it. And he wondered, how often do people try and fix things by adding to it rather than taking away, which is actually simpler and more elegant? And so he took a bunch of Legos to his engineering firm, gave everyone the same problem, and 100% of the professional engineers wanted to add to the bridge instead of simply taking out. And so I guess I've always tried to go, okay, how can we make it simpler and easier? Right. And so flow is kind of what we're working on. And, so we're dealing with, in the laboratory, we have a business, we're dealing with a lot of people and we're finding, okay, you've got to make it simple. Like take the 80-20 rule to an extreme. Like what 20% could you do, which would yield 80% of the results, and how comfortable can you be with just moving forward?
Yeah, I think one of the things that was really became apparent, Steve loved working with people one-on-one, but not everybody could. I mean, he's only one person. So he was kind of maxing out what he could do coaching wise. And we realized that the concepts that he was learning with client after client after client over years and years were actually generally applicable. And so we realized we could actually share on a broader scale by doing group trainings and group coaching kind of a situation. And we've seen some of the fruit of that. And so that's been really, really cool. It's also something that we can do together.
Yeah. Yeah, because the coaching I did was quite complex, but in it, I started to see patterns of very simple things that people could do, which would often shift things for them. And so it's like, okay, maybe if we can really teach people these couple simple things, maybe we could scale it, I guess, is the idea.
Yeah.
So good. I participated in Samara and Steve's Flow training maybe last month or so, and it's changed my life. No joke. Would you guys share just a bit about it? Because I know people will put links and things to future things you're doing, but
Sure.
It's transformative. Yeah.
Well, first, I'd love to hear if you could just say one or two things that you feel like you took from it that have been, practically applied in your life.
Yeah, I'd love to. So there's 4 principles I think Steve will walk us through. But the first of them is like this foundation of worthiness, and I find definitely with women, maybe some men as well, I'm sure, there's like this, I don't know, we just don't believe like that we're loved or worthy at the baseline. And so in our lives, we're like hustling for that, for through everything. And so the premise is just like, no, you're worthy. Like there's a father who loves you and he loves to bring things to you. And like if you open yourself up, like you can actually receive and to pause and take a breath. So that one was huge, and that's just the foundation. And then off of there, it talks about like timelessness, effortlessness, and then receiving a richness. And I've realized how much I let time be a bully in my life, and like, oh, I don't have enough time for this. I don't have enough time for this. And then it's like your mind just is like zeroed in on the wrong thing, and then you're not open. And just one quick story, I felt like one day I just had like a little bit of a open morning, and our town was having like an ice skating event, and they had s'mores, and I love s'mores, so I was like, I'm gonna go make a s'more. And then, instead of just like rushing through and like making my s'more and leaving, I was like, no, God, like I'm here and I want to be open. And I ended up connecting with this guy, and he runs a podcast just like me for all the business owners in the area. And he's just kind of been like a key opener or door opener to the city. And had I not like been open to pausing, not letting time be a bully, I wouldn't have met him. And yeah. So there's just so many things off the back of it. It's been powerful.
Yeah. Love it.
So huge. It's amazing.
Well, one thing I kind of like to talk a bit about is I think that people, for some reason, are wired to have an addiction to feeling that they need to be punished for performance, and take that a step further, an addiction to believing that God wants to punish. And so that creates quite a troubling synergistic combination. On top of that, I tell people that that high quality leadership is in very short supply. And so if you don't have high quality leadership skills, then you have to resort to guilt and shame to control and manipulate a situation to keep organizational cohesion. So when you put that in a like religious setting, it's one thing to have a boss who's a bit of an a-hole, but you don't go to the boss in a very deliberate manner to have the boss tell you what you're worth. Right. When you step inside of a church building, that's in a religious environment, that's what you're doing. And so, often in religious environments, then because again, the average person doesn't have good leadership skills. Now, in a religious environment, you have guilt and shame to control and manipulate organizations, right? So I think a big part of flow is, we would describe flow as when things are easy and amazingly abundant. And people have a general affinity for flow. And this is demonstrated in the fact that we love sporting events where athletes do extraordinary things but make it look easy, or concerts where this musician plays this crazy complicated piece of music, but it looks easy, right? For those people, it is easy, right? So flow has in it, how do you dramatically improve outcome or results? And this is a kind of very hip area of research now. And researchers who are very into this, they would say, well, executives who are in flow are typically 400 to 500% more effective than other people, right? So flow is a way to radically improve performance, and yet improve ease, and they're combined, right? So interesting enough, there's a scripture in the New Testament that says this, that God's kingdom, or God's way of doing and being, has three sequential steps: righteousness, peace, and joy. And righteousness is not like you must have certain behavior. Righteousness is like the ability to come before God without any sense of guilt and shame in your life, right? Which then gives you peace, right, in any environment, no matter how it's working out, which then gives you the joy of then actually having the outcome you want. And so I often look at these people who are understanding performance in a certain way and go, yeah, that's actually in the New Testament if you read it through the lens of unconditional love. So that's, we can talk a bit briefly about the 4 steps of flow if you want. And could we go there, or what would you like us to do?
Yeah, I would love to give people a taster and then any other way to follow up with you guys because, yeah, it's so powerful.
Well, I was just going to say the first one you were talking about, worthiness, is so important. And I think that there's continuing layers with each of these. And it just depends on which season you're in, is we can just go deeper and deeper and deeper. The first one is actually selflessness. The next one is timelessness. The third one is effortlessness. And the fourth one is richness. And so I love that you renamed selflessness as worthiness, because if you don't take these words and actually, chew them up, digest them, and apply them to your life, it stays an abstract concept. And so we actually ask people as often as possible to rename each segment to be something that means something to them. And so with the selflessness, big thing about selflessness is, not letting something that shouldn't tell you what you're worth, not letting anything take away your worth. And so maybe we have some things to add to that.
Yeah, well, whatever gets to tell you what you're worth owns you. Yeah. Right. So you can go through life in one of 2 ways. You can allow your personal performance and or how people treat you and or how institutions honor you tell you what you're worth. And you'll be in force and life will be a struggle because none of those 3 things ever are consistent.
Let's just stop and give a quick example, like how institutions honor you. Let's say that your job is something that is really meaningful to you, and the person who is over you positionally wants you to do a certain thing or wants you not to do a certain thing. And you have a decision to make based on your own conscience or your own passion or whatever it is. But yet they're not supportive of the decision you're making. Right. All of a sudden you're like, well, if I don't do what they say, I don't have any sense of worth. This person is in charge of my life. This person's in charge of my destiny. All of a sudden you've put person where they shouldn't be.
Yeah. Well, an institution could also be the institution of motherhood or the institution, anything like that, the institution of marriage. Like, oh, your marriage failed. Now you're worthless. Like, oh, so the institution of marriage gets to tell you what you're worth. So
your child didn't do what society thinks they should do.
The kid's having major issues, then you are not a good mom or a dad. Right. So
worthless.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's like it makes us vulnerable to a lot of different things. So, the most important question to be able to answer in your life, hands down, is where do you get your value? And it is a question that people never deliberately create rules and values for. And so what happens then, it's entirely arbitrary, and typically arbitrary in a way that makes you extremely vulnerable to your environment.
Yeah.
So as a result, you don't have consistent peace because the peace is connected to favorable your peace and joy. Yeah. Here's one way to put it. Your peace and joy can be one of 2 things. They can be emotions based on your favorable circumstances and performance, or they can be a gift that comes from clear identity, and then they become a spiritual force which changes your circumstance. So when I come into an environment and bring my peace and joy, and then I'm in charge of the environment, or is my peace and joy dependent on what do you think of me, or how well did I do today, or is my marriage working out, or right? So yeah. Everyone has to decide, get their own definition where their value comes from. I personally have not found a better definition for me than believing that God loves me unconditionally, whether or not I grasp it or not, I can still agree with it. Right. So that's a big hurdle for people. And that is that they feel that they have to understand something before agreeing with it. When in fact you can go, okay, we'll go with that. So
So good. Really quickly before you go on to the other 3, how how did you come to this answer in your own lives? Like, how did you know your value?
I don't think you ever get to the end of it. It's a lifelong
Yeah.
movement, right? I did have an interesting experience once. This would ask me 8 years ago, do you understand God loves you? I'm like, oh yeah, I read the books, sure. And in retrospect, I'm like, no, I was clueless. And I had this interesting experience of we were in church and we go to kind of at that time we go to a fairly atypical church, let's say that, right? Not a religious, like, type of thing. So I was in church and my pastor said this. He goes, someday you could ask God, have you ever been disappointed in me? He goes, but don't do it while you're driving, which was kind of a weird suggestion.
Mm-hmm.
And as I joke, I go, I'm a guy, we don't follow directions super good normally. And so 30 minutes later, I'm in my car and I go to ask the question, but I didn't finish asking the question. I was so strongly interrupted with such a strong no on the inside of me that I literally had to pull the car off the road. It was such a visceral experience. It would be like you go to ask me for water and I turn the fire hose on you, knock you to the ground, push you halfway across the room, and you're like,
Wow.
note to self, we don't need to talk about that anymore, right?
Wow.
So the issue was I was sitting by the side of the road in my car and I know the answer, but I don't intellectually grasp it. The two different things. I knew the answer and I agreed with it. I did not wrap my brain around it. But in thinking about like if God is the embodiment of unconditional love and if I am the object of that unconditional love, then in the definition of unconditional love, there was no room for disappointment. And it was not something that I fully grasped, but I made a decision to agree with without grasping it. It's something that you have to revisit every day, times a day, because your whole environment in life will try to take that from you because it's the world we live in is wired to do that. And so if you want to operate in flow, the knockdown, drag out battle is to reorient yourself to powerful identity over and over. You'll never that battle will never stop, right? But you can start winning enough that it changes every area of your life.
Yeah.
So good.
So
So good. It's beautiful. What about for you, Samara?
Well, I grew up in a family of faith, and I feel very, very blessed and honored, And at some point when I was little, I just I believed what my parents told me, but I also resonated in my own heart. It wasn't just a mental like agreement that Jesus loved me. And the love of Jesus has always been there. When I check, it's there. Um, as life happens, I get opportunities to question that. And it's like, okay, let's go back to, something bad happened. Does that mean Jesus doesn't love you? Something I experienced something. I felt like I was alone. Was I alone? And just bringing everything, like Steve said, to like, let me look at this from a different perspective. And I make it, when you look backwards, it's easy to make it kind of sound like, oh, you just mind over matter it. It's no, it's messy and bloody almost really. It's like, oh, I totally crashed and burned. You know, I have this like raw open wound and yet, okay, so is it really still true? Does he still love me? Or I messed up in a big way? Or, does he love me? It's like it's been, like you said, an exploration, a continual exploration. Um, but there's scripture that talks about what love is in Corinthians 13. And there's scripture that says God is love. And you read Corinthians 13 and you realize he's actually describing himself. And it says, love believes all things, love hopes all things. He doesn't hold a record of wrong. So it's saying, oh, that's how God operates. He believes in me no matter what. He his love for me is never gonna fail. And so just basically saying, am I going to look at the circumstances to determine what I believe, or am I going to let what I believe give me the filter for my circumstances? Right. And so those are two different ways, because the enemy, I mean, I believe there's an enemy that wants to keep us from hope and love and from the goodness of God. And, he wants to take what he calls facts and to cause us to look at our past, our present, and our future without hope. There's an opportunity for things to be twisted. And we just have to, honestly, we have to engage with tools that we have.
Thank you. That's so good. What about the other three?
So selflessness, timelessness, effortlessness, and richness. I think you described timelessness very well. Of is time a bully or not?
Mhm.
So you have to be very careful of internally using words like I have to, must, should, have to, I must, I should. If you're using those words, then something else is in charge of your life.
Yeah.
And you can't be fundamentally powerful when something else is bullying you, right? Timelessness has a lot to do with reorienting your relationship with frustration. Like we all get frustrated, and usually we take frustration to mean I'm not sure if this is going to work out. I'm not sure if I have what it takes to do what I really want, but I'm not willing to quit, so I'm going to simply move forward with the same mindset and same approach. Right.
So just do more.
Just do more. So in flow, we change our relationship with timelessness to understand that frustration is merely a beautiful reminder that you're doing it the hard way, and there is an easy way if you started looking for it. So it's the questions we ask ourselves, the expectation we have. And so probably one of the most simple things that I that I implement in our business is and I want to say this not to brag, but to put some weight to what I behind what I've said. The business we started in 2 years, we're generating almost $700,000 a month in volume, right, from scratch. So this is a principle I taught the leaders in my business, and to ask a very simple question, which was, how come it was, past tense, so easy to whatever?
Yeah.
How come it was so easy to do this in business? How come it was so easy to create a marriage? How come it was so easy to get in shape? How come it was so easy to resolve this conflict? Right. So it's we're very deliberately pointing our brain in a certain direction instead of how come I can't do that? Which sounds like a great idea, but all the answers you'll get will just be full of guilt and shame and not helpful.
Right. If you don't believe there's an answer, you won't look for, the brain won't look for one.
Yeah. So that's the effortlessness I think I referred to.
We've kind of pushed them together. Yeah.
Yeah. And then the last one, richness, is you know, it's important to believe that life can be really abundant and that maybe life could be more abundant than you technically deserve, like it could be a gift. And so one of the key aspects of flow is it should feel fun and playful, right? Like if you have a vision for the end result and you can see yourself, like you use your God-given imagination and corresponding accurate emotion, and you can see and feel the desired end result so clearly that much of your being thinks it's already happened, right? When that, if I ask you, well, how did you get there? And you have two options. You can say, well, I finally won the personal development Olympics. I did everything perfectly enough for long enough that I got what I deserved. Great. How are you going to maintain it? You're going to have to continue winning the personal development Olympics. Or can you have a sense of mercy and grace? Like, man, I'm very aware of how many things I didn't do as well as I could have, but I don't seem to get all the consequences from it. And what I'm getting, I can't quite wrap my brain around on what I actually did deserve it. Oh, well, that feels it's much easier to breathe, right? So you go from this to like, oh, well, thank you. Like, so someone gives you a gift that you don't understand it's the scope of its generosity. Like, you can't wrap your brain around it. Can you still receive it? Because there's a lot of abundance in life that people walk past because they've decided haven't and they're not in a position to receive it because they're already.
Yeah, we get very addicted to a linear process. And so we think, oh, okay, if this is out here and I'm here, then what are the steps? How can I get there? And I can only get to where I can see myself getting to. Right? Like this is reasonable. Like I have this much now, I can see myself improving 25%, or some sort of measurement that we can conceive of. And what Steve's talking about is, but my dream is this, right? And it doesn't maybe have a huge basis in reality based on what I've currently created, right? And so he's talking about, okay, so if I did say yes to that dream, right, whatever it is, and then I imagine myself having accomplished it, and I'm like experiencing the emotions of accomplishing it, and I'm looking back and saying, like, wow, how did this come together? How was this so easy? How is that? This is so far beyond. Like you're just experiencing that awe of, you know, thank goodness I believed. Thank goodness I said yes to the dream. It's like you live in that place that you get the emotion so clear, right? And then you live from there. So then you don't get to just experience those good emotions when you get there. You're experiencing them, and it actually kind of becomes a bit of a compass, right? You're like, oh, this is my reality. And I don't know what all's going to come together for it to happen, but I'm living in it. And Steve uses often example. We're kind of crossing over a tiny bit into vision now, which is something we really love coaching people on, really passionate about. But one of the big analogies that Stephen uses for this and is about pregnancy. So when a woman is pregnant or a family is pregnant, um, they love the baby before they are holding the baby, right? And the reality of that child is so real that they've got names picked out, they've got the room ready, everyone knows this is happening. All of these things, there's a ramp up where no one sees the evidence of it, right? But you've conceived of it. And so the emotions of love, everything is already there. And so then when the baby comes, it's just the culmination of what was already true 9 months ago, right? And so that's what we encourage people to kind of look like the Lord. He knows the end from the beginning, right? So we go to the end, we experience that, and then we allow ourselves to flow to it. Because, I mean, if you think about it, there's always challenges in life, but if you like have clarity about where you're going, it's more like a bump in the road many times. Or it becomes a head scratcher, but it's not something that causes you to just stop there and say, well, I guess I can't go any further. Right? Um, there's this um there's this theory called the hero's journey. It's not a theory, they talk about writing, how writers of amazing books, they follow the hero's journey. And I like to look at it also in our own lives. It's a bit of a rabbit trail, but it's kind of like, okay, imagine you're at the end of your life and you're adding up all the things that you've done. It's like if you actually reading the last chapter of your book and it was all set, it was done. Then when you came upon this challenge of loss, heartbreak, or disappointment, would it hold you down for long? It would just be one of the chapters in the book. of the way that you got there. And so I want you to talk about not getting too stuck on the how when you have a vision.
Yeah, so Jesus said if you have faith as one of these children, like this is how you have to participate in God's kingdom. So God's way of doing and being. And so the power of childlike faith would be to ask for a pony for Christmas without consideration of, do I deserve a pony? Where are we going to keep the pony? What kind of pony are we going to get? Who's taking care of like, these are not, this is not part of the process that has to be ironed out before you ask for the pony as a child, right? And so one suggestion is have a vision for how you want your life to look and feel, but you can be a little vague on what exactly you're doing and how you got there. It's like, are you walking on the beach holding hands with someone who's your life partner and they're a perfect fit? You have to work out like, well, wow, what do they look like? How did I do it? It's like, no. What's the weather like on the beach? That's what I want to know, right? And then you ask yourself, how come it was easy to find this person? Or are you out to dinner with your spouse on a Friday night and you can tell me the restaurant and the meal and the sound around you and everything. And I've asked you, and how was your week? You're like, oh, meaningful work for meaningful pay. Oh, nice. See what I mean? It's like, instead of going, I'm not sure what kind of job I want, so I can't have a vision. It's like, but you know what kind of job you want. You want a job that's meaningful work for meaningful pay that makes you feel energy at the end of the week and excited to go back on Monday. That's what you want. So that's your vision, not, well, I want to be this person at this company. It's like, because it could be something, if you expand, if you let go of the how, you might be like, oh my God, I'm really good at this, right? And the pay is good, and very few people can do that. Like, oh, how come I didn't think of that before? Because you're like, well, but I need a job at like,
Yeah.
some big A accounting firm. Like, okay, yeah, So,
That's so good. So it's like broadening the expectation and then it opens you
yeah,
up.
it's broadening the potential solution and how you would get there, because world-class solutions are not, they're always outside the box.
Yeah.
Right. So I think, we talked a bit about maybe having a brief conversation about abstraction.
Yeah.
And understand that your nervous system is fundamentally wired to despise uncertainty and unpredictability. Right. So how's that gonna work out? I don't know. And your brain goes, well, we could be homeless. You like drive right into the homeless ditch. Right. And like, well, if you don't know, maybe we'll win the lottery. Like you never go, ooh, I have no idea how I'm gonna do that. We could be the world class. Like our brain desires like to be comfortable. I need the 5 sequential steps for the next 10 years. Then I'll be comfortable, right? But um, but what you really want to understand is um in the process of figuring things out in life, the God view is wise, the life view is meaningful, the emotion is understanding, but the process by which it works out is abstraction. And the divine, you call the divine God's way of doing it, universe, whatever you want to say, the beautiful, extraordinary flow is not sequential steps. It's seemingly disconnected things, disconnected and broken things coming together by divine order and time to create something beautiful. And so you can't orchestrate or manipulate abstraction or beautiful. There has to be an element of receiving it. And so to receive it, you also have to be very comfortable with uncertainty and unpredictability. Right. So you have to be able to look at your life and go, I have no idea how it's going to work out, but I bet it's going to be amazing. I can't wait. And you can only do that if you believe that the divine love is working on your behalf to do things that you can't do on your own. And so that's faith is what it is. And here's the interesting thing: physiologically, we are a spirit, we have a soul, which is our mind, our will, our intellect, our emotions, and we live in a physical body. And often the Christian church makes a fatal error of looking at your physical body as a burden rather than a stunning asset. And what science now knows is that you actually have three brains in your body, right? You have a gut brain. When people say that I had a gut feeling, that's accurate. Because if 8 times the amount of nerve signaling going from gut to your brain is from your brain to your gut, it's the sensing brain. You have a feeling brain in your heart, and you have a thinking brain. And a scientific measurement of stress in terms of heart rate variability has it's how well your nervous system switches from rest and relaxation to fight or it's how well it deals with uncertainty and unpredictability. So one of this brain's job is to tell this brain, move forward into uncertainty and unpredictability. And so when the Bible says faith is of the heart, and previous to that, people go, well, it's not really your organ. It's like, well, there is an aspect of faith residing in this portion of your body, and the ability to go, I have no idea how it's going to work out, but I'm confident it will, because I'm not an orphan. See, and so that comes together. And sometimes the amount of peace and joy you have is an indication of, am I in faith? Am I in flow? Am I walking in love? All that.
So powerful.
We talked about abstraction, and I'm reminded of how we met. So I was living in Tulsa. You could probably hear our cat playing with a pencil under the table. I'm sorry.
That's
Chasing
good.
the dry erase marker all over the wood floors.
The cat is so excited about flow.
Yeah, cats and flow,
And
for sure.
abstraction.
I was living in Tulsa. I worked at a kids camp outside of Tulsa for 2 summers, and after my second summer, I felt like I was 18. I was like, I felt like I needed to move out. There was nothing wrong with my home life. I just had found this sort of independence that I'd never had before, and I knew I had to keep growing that independence. At that time, my parents were very supportive, and so um I moved to Oklahoma and was staying with an aunt, and I was working at Glamour Shots, and I felt this prompting to eat at a certain restaurant one day before work. I was trying to spend as little time at home as possible at my aunt's house because they were out of town and their house was kind of creepy at that time. And so I was driving in the parking lot and I had this prompting to go in to this certain restaurant. It was a nicer restaurant. I didn't want to eat there by myself, but this prompting from the inside was like, you need to go in there. There's someone in there you need to meet, you know. And I kind of argued with the prompting, which I believe was, I believe it was divine. And in the end, I ended up going in. And this person who was not my waiter took really good care of me, found out I was curious about if someone liked working there, and brought me an application while I was sitting at the table and a pen, which I filled out. As soon as it was filled out, he grabbed it, ran to the manager, came back, and then all of a sudden I'm eating my salad and there's a manager at the table with me interviewing me. So, and then I got the job. And then Steve promptly forgot all about me, left the job, went to go sell water purifiers.
So I was like, I'm gonna make money doing this.
You can call your perspective.
Sucked at that.
So right when I was starting, I got a promotion from hostessing to waiting tables. Right when I was getting trained to wait tables, Steve had his first night back, and he was very, very helpful.
Yeah. So, the interesting thing about it is like the sequential steps versus abstract flow, right? If you'd ask me, well, what's your sequential steps? I'm like, well, I'm going to graduate and leave Oklahoma as fast as possible, go back to Colorado, which is the promised land, and meet some mountain biker chicks, right? If you had said, how about a girl who's almost 19 from Texas, who's a hairdresser who does not go camping at all, be like, no, no, right. But in the divine abstract process, that was actually the best fit. So you kind of have to receive it. Does that make sense? And so I didn't know that in the areas that are most important that were a great fit. See, and that's how you tap into flow and the extraordinary results. And that was
Years ago.
26
Almost
years
26.
ago. Well, we met over 26
Oh,
years.
that's true. Yeah.
So there you
That's
go.
so
Right.
True.
I love
So
how
it's like, yeah, that's flow, that's abstraction. I
Mhm.
did have, if you'd asked me, well, who are you gonna marry? I'm like, I sometimes occasionally just see from the back a girl with dark hair talking to a bunch of people. And
Oh,
I know that that's my wife.
yeah, 100%.
Yeah, but I can't see her face, but I have an understanding how I feel about her and how much she's like engaged with people. And if
Yeah.
you know my wife, you're like, oh, and that would be her. So
Yes. Oh, that's so beautiful. So beautiful. I'm taking this to heart. That's so good. If people find themselves like in this like sequential, like I have to do this mode, like how do you shift? Just like as we close, any advice?
you know, to quote Tony Robbins, the quality of your state determines the quality of your life. And
Mm,
so, first step, don't put guilt and shame on yourself. Like, I can't believe I'm out of flow. Such an idiot. Like, okay, hold on. It's like you can't slather yourself with guilt and shame in order to produce beautiful outcomes. So you just go, you observe your current performance state. You go, oh, interesting. Set it aside.
yeah.
Secondarily, I think it's most helpful to use your physical body, how you're standing, moving, breathing, the
Mm,
countenance on your face, everything's to step into by faith into like how would you stand, move, breathe if you knew exactly what to do and it all turned out, right?
yeah.
Allow your physical body to produce certain biochemistry to help support certain emotions,
Hmm.
then start speaking things in your life. You know, like when I met my wife, I'm like, I think I'm gonna marry her. Then I'm like, or you're making the biggest mistake of your life. So talk
Okay.
about like, you know, I can't see 10 years down the road and it doesn't quite make sense. So what I would actually have to do is I had to do this by faith. So I had to put on the physiology of someone who made a good decision and had to say over and over and over, no, I'll make the right decision. I know how to hear from God.
Yeah.
And in the face of emotions telling me you could be making the biggest mistake of your entire life because this is the decision. This is the most important decision. And some of it doesn't make sense. Right.
Mhm.
So
Yeah. Oh, that's so good.
so a big part of I'll tell you a big part is this tranquility breeds creativity.
Hmm. Tranquility
So
breeds.
often I ask my coaching clients who are stuck and they've got things I got to figure out. I'm like, so what do you do for fun? And they're like, I can't have fun until this is fixed. I'm like, yeah, no. As you go have fun, you go from freaking out. I got to focus on the problem because that's the responsible thing to do to go, you know what? It's all going to work out.
Mm.
Oh, this is what I could do. You know, one of my spiritual mentors has a very large ministry and responsibility. He goes, when I have problems in my ministry, the first step was I go fishing.
Hmm.
Now, so people go, can't believe he's fishing. That's so irresponsible. He's like, he does not care. Don't you care? Yeah, but when I sit on my fishing boat, I'll get divine guidance. I'll be back with the solution.
Mm.
Sitting in my office being responsible, not happening. And so for me, I have to learn what works for me. Sitting in the sauna works for me, doing cold plunges, exercising,
Music can change your state.
music, binaural audios. If you don't know what that is, look up that. That's very helpful. Different, like we have fancy things like I have an Opus sound bed. Which
The main thing is not to try to use your thoughts to change your thoughts, not to try to use your emotions to change your emotions. Use your words to change your thoughts,
Hmm.
right? So say something that is different, right? Then don't just match the energy that you're feeling. Although there is something to matching it if you need to express it, but use it as an opportunity to then express higher truth,
Hmm.
right? So if you tap into an emotion, okay, don't just tap into it, but use that, okay, what's the deeper truth than what I'm feeling now? What's a higher thought, and so engage your voice and engage, like Steve said, how you stand, how you move, like go for a walk, but not like a blah walk, like a walk, like use the tools that you have.
should we talk about David and Goliath as they know?
What are we
Yeah.
doing on time?
Yeah. Share that one, and then I'd love to have you guys just like share a blessing over the listeners, and then we'll close.
Yeah, so I think it's interesting to use the story of David and Goliath as an outline for how to deal with this, right? So understand that before he shows up on the battlefield and sees Goliath trash talking the whole Israelite army, someone had spoken identity into him, right? The prophet had said, "You are going to be the next king." So he had that, but he also had some bit of life experience. So David shows up as a young boy on to the battlefield. It's the Israelites versus, I guess, the Philistine army. And Goliath, this mighty warrior, would come on and he would trash talk the entire Israelite army every day. So it's to understand there's things in your life that are trash talking you. Oh, you'll never succeed at this. I'm going to embarrass you. You've tried to do this before. Go ahead and try, right? So Goliath was trying to say, I get to tell you what you're worth, right? And the whole Israeli army, they get excited first, and Goliath will start trash talking, and then they would draw back, right? So David shows up and he asks a question. He goes, what does the man get who kills him? So with every challenge you have in front of you in your life, ask this: if I overcome this and win, what's the benefit? Like something tragic happened to you, don't ask why did why did that happen to me? Go, what's the gift in it? How is it going to make me better and stronger? So
I like that. What's the reward?
what's the reward?
Overcome this.
Yeah, so I mean, long story short, I mean, David killing Goliath was very helpful for the PR campaign in becoming king. I mean, this is super helpful. Great, great
It's true.
visuals. You know what I mean? This is the lingo of the day, right? So
Yeah.
he asked, well, what do you get? What does the man get? And they go, well, your whole family gets to be tax free, and you get to marry the king's daughter. And let whatever motivate you. Like the teenage boy asked 3 follow-up questions about the hot girl, 0 questions. Okay. It's like, so you'll meet further obstacles. The next obstacle you'll get is people who should support you will not.
Hmm.
Saul should have been like, you go, man.
David's brothers.
Yeah, Saul was the king. Like everyone should have been like, yeah, do it. But Saul was like, you don't understand. You don't get it. You're not being logical. He's been a stone cold killer since he's been a kid, and you're just a kid, right? So you understand you're going to run into that in life as you try to overcome. Oh, you'll never do that. You don't know enough. You don't have an experience. You can't be an author. Blah 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 blah. Whatever, right? So what did David do? David rehearsed his past victories, and it's very good for you as you're trying to overcome things. Rehearse your past victories. Technically, ideally, pen and paper. When you write things down, pen and paper, there's something in your brain called a mirror neuron that when you put it on paper, your brain thinks it happened again and you get double credit. And there's a huge amount of clinical research backing that up. So David said this, he goes, hey, look, he goes, King, he's talking about his experience of being a shepherd and the lion and bear trying to take sheep. And one thing he said in the original Hebrew, it's kind of very graphic. He goes, yeah, I grabbed the lion by the beard and I punched him in the face till he died. And he goes, and this guy, he's going down too. Well, Saul's like, okay, right? Next obstacle you run into, you'll get advice on how to do it, which isn't the appropriate advice for you. It will sound like wisdom. Oh, everyone does it this way. And what Saul said, he goes, well, okay, here's my armor, and here's my shield, and here's my helmet. But it didn't fit David, right? So sometimes the beautiful solution to take over your giant is not like normal common sense. This is how we do it. It's like, be open that it could be different, right? Because David's like, well, do we have to do it that way? How about, how about I stand 30 yards away from him and hit him in the head with a rock? Was no one in the entire army, no one's thought of this. It's like, it's an aha moment, right? But you can't be like that. You only get aha moments like this, right? And so then David started talking to the giant. He's like, I will. He put it in context is very important. He said he called the giant an uncircumcised Philistine. And what he was really doing, he was saying, I have divine love and intervention on my side, and you do not. He goes, I have covenant and you don't. So I'm moving forward into this situation, not as an orphan, but with everything I need. Right. And there's also there's the power of thinking big. And in the story, it's very interesting. It very specifically mentions that David picked up 5 stones out of the brook. It's like five. Well, later in the Old Testament, it talks about the 4 brothers of Goliath were killed by one of David's 4 mighty men, right? So it's good to understand that you taking on your personal giant can have generational impacts, a precedent setting event, because the other giants that were killed, they took up like 1 or 2 sentences because it was like, well, we killed giants and this is like, we don't even need to talk about it. This is just normal. See? So what if the giant you're taking on made generational impact for people you care about? Where everyone's like, oh yeah, this is how we do it. We're successful, we overcome this, this is how we show up in life, right? Different things like that, so
Oh,
anyways.
so good. That was like gold. Seriously. So
So
good.
it's all about, do you sit there while your giant is trash talking to you, or do you get up and realize this is trying to steal your entire life,
Mm.
and are you willing to get violent?
Yeah.
Oh, it's because too often people are like, oh, I know I shouldn't think that way, and it's not ideal, and yeah, I'm kind of hard on myself. It's like, you know, if most of the people listening to this, if you went for a walk with me and my 18-month-old granddaughter, and you talked to her like you talk to yourself,
Mm.
and you try to talk to my granddaughter, I I would hurt you.
Stop
Mhm.
you for sure.
I would hurt you. It would not go on. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yet, um, we talk to ourselves like that, and in doing so, you fundamentally disconnect from the divine who loves
Mm.
you unconditionally. So,
Yeah. Oh, so good. Every time I talk to you guys, I just leave like so inspired and like with such a broader scope. And I know our listeners are feeling that as well. Would you just share a blessing, an impartation, anything on your heart as for our listeners as we just end our time together? And thank you so much. This has been rich.
well, I would just say this before I do that, that everyone who, all the smartest psychologists, people who really understand how people are wired, one thing they will all agree on is that every single person has a fundamental set of unique gifts and talents in the way they're wired. That
Mhm.
if they discovered it and if they invested in it, that everyone has the ability to be world class at something. So, so my blessing that I would speak over you is that you get a divine insight on your fundamental original design, that you would realize that you're not missing anything, and that in that you would have such clarity for your future, of how beautiful it can and will be, that it would give you tremendous power in your present day-to-day action.
Beautiful.
Okay.
Samara, anything for me?
I would say take a minute and own what you're extraordinary at, because God made you to be extraordinary at certain things. And if you will accept and own what you're extraordinary at, you'll be more likely to accept other people's extraordinary into your life and to realize what a huge blessing it is, and to create opportunities for them and take opportunities yourself. Because you not being extraordinary is causing a deficit in the world around you.
Yeah.
And so, um, yeah, I would
Here's
say,
here's one simple piece of advice. Take to heart the piece of advice I was given and ask God, have you ever been disappointed in me? Start there, right? Be open to a divine encounter that would fundamentally rewire your identity and value,
yeah,
because that's where you have to start. You can't move forward without that. And so that's got to be clear.
Yeah.
yeah.
So
And I would
good.
say you could be brave and say, God, if you're real, show me.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, thank you both so much. This was so beautiful in so many ways. And just thank you for who you are and how you pour out to everyone. And it's just such a gift to know you both.
Thank you for having us,
Yes.
Lauren.
Great to know you.
Yes.
Super proud of you.
Thank you so much.